What is the weirdest thing you had to do at someone else's house because of their culture or religion? Look forward to new Reddit videos every single day by clicking that subscribe button. Hey, you might as well. It's free. I used to have a job that rented a lot of houses and properties in Southern California. Part of my job was meeting with property owners and to close a deal with them. One day I go to this man's house in Laguna Beach, as in, his house was on the beach. I was meeting with an insanely wealthy, but also insanely nice, Asian man, who I had met a couple of times before, and we had somewhat of a work type relationship. As I begin to bring up the deal to be made, he suggests we walk to the beach first. I was ready to get home. It was Saturday, so we start walking, talking about life, etc. He then proceeded to hold my hand, interlocked finger style, for the whole walk. I was originally weirded out by it, but when I brought it up to a coworker, he said it's just a part of their culture. He also made me wear his personal house slippers to be allowed entry into his home. Just cultural differences, but it still cracks me up that the most romantic beach walk I've ever had in my life was with a 75-year-old something man millionaire. I remember seeing a picture of George W. Bush holding hands with Saudi Arabia's King Abdullah in 2005, just leisurely strolling through Bush's Texas ranch. I was so confused. I remember going to my Swedish friend's house, and while we were playing in his room, his mom yelled that dinner was ready, and check this. He told me to wait in his room while they ate. That shit was freaking wild. I slept over at a friend's house. When we woke up, he said he's going downstairs for a few minutes. After about 15 minutes, I go on the stairs to see what the frick is happening, and they're eating breakfast. They see me, and tell me he's almost done and will be up there soon. I still think about that shit 25 years later. I had this happen to me too. Later on, my stomach was making ridiculously loud growling noises, and everyone pretended to not hear it. I live in Sweden. Can confirm, not all Swedes are like this, though, but some. So weird. I went over to my friend's house to play D&D in high school, and my friend's mom made lunch for the 7 of us. It was really good. We were just playing D&D and eating tacos, and after we all finished the lunch, everyone started pulling out cash. I was super confused. My friend turned to me and asked, "Do you have your $5? So apparently, we were supposed to pay for the meal. I was incredibly embarrassed. One of my other friends ended up paying for me. I never played D&D at that house ever again. Edit. This happened in SoCal. They were just a standard American household as far as I was aware. The food was homemade. D&D is Dungeons and Dragons. It's a role-playing game. Also, I can confirm that my friend was not taking the money. I literally saw him give it to his mom. What the actual frick? Don't know what's weirder, the fact that they asked you to pay, or the fact that the others were prepared. Went to a friend's house for dinner. A lovely meal. The whole family cleaned their plates of food, then turned them over and ate dessert on the back of their plates, like it was the most normal thing in the world. I copied them just to be polite. This might be my favorite one here. The mental image of a family flipping their plates over to eat dessert is absolutely hilarious. Plot twist, they only do that when guests come over. When I lived in Antwerp, Belgium, I once was stopped by an elderly woman on the street. She was asking for help inside her house, guiding me through a house where the temperature was way too hot. She stopped at every radiator and asked me to turn them down. In the end, we went to the kitchen, where some Jewish women and children were watching me silently while I was putting all the burning gas stoves on a low heat. Then she showed me out, thanked me and closed the door. In Antwerp, there is a big community of Hasidic Jews. I can imagine this was during Sabbath. Correct. They can't adjust fire on the Sabbath, so they asked a Gentile to do it for them. There are limitations on that as well. Limitations on what they can ask a non-Jewish person to do for them, not on what they can ask, but more how they ask. Officially, they can't ask outright, but they can't hint at it to be done. This way, it's not as though they directly caused something to be done, which they are not allowed to, but rather the non-Jew did it themselves. Imagine thinking you can trick God with a technicality. When I was in primary school, I made a new friend from Hong Kong. One day she came over to my house for a play date. and when her parents came to pick her up in the evening, my parents invited them all to stay for dinner at ours. They were new immigrants to Australia, and I guess my parents thought they might not have many friends or family here. Anyway, they politely declined and said they didn't want to impose. My parents insisted it was no imposition at all, but they again declined, saying they didn't want to be rude and intrude on our family. We were kind of taken aback, but just assumed maybe they had their own dinner waiting at home and were too polite to say, so we saw them off. My friend later explained that her parents thought my parents weren't being genuine and were only asking out of politeness, and the fact that our parents didn't press the issue further was proof that we didn't really want them there. It's not weird, but I thought it was an interesting contrast. Even as a kid, in the West, when someone offers you hospitality, it's seen as a genuine and voluntary gesture, and it'd be rude to turn it down. Whereas in some cultures, the offer of hospitality is seen as a compulsory courtesy but not necessarily always genuinely meant, so it's impolite to accept it immediately. In the West, it would be impolite to keep insisting after someone's already declined an offer, but in other cultures you're expected to press the issue a bit and keep insisting to give them a chance to accept if they want to, without appearing rude. There's a word for it in Farsi, taraf. When my parents immigrated to Australia and were invited to their first party at a white Aussie household, they kept refusing food and drinks, thinking it would be offered a second and third time, but ended up going hungry all night and wondering why the hosts were so rude. They laugh about it now though. I had a good friend whose family were wealthy and very big on some weird sort of gift giving. Basically there were two things. 1. You could not give them a present. No gifts at birthdays, Christmas, etc. If you gave them a gift, they would either politely refuse or donate it. 2. You always received a gift if you went to their house, even if it was for an afternoon. I remember going to my friend's house when I was 8 or 9, 1998, 1999, and them giving me a PlayStation, and each time I went over they'd give me a new game, which continued until they gave me a Nintendo GameCube. Very weird, and it wasn't because I was poor, we lived in the same area, etc. This recently repeated itself when I visited my friend's house, now lives with his own family, and when I was leaving, his wife was trying to give me a bottle of scotch, and my daughter a freaking Nintendo Switch. Edit. They were Middle Eastern, not really sure what religion. His dad was a property developer and investor. This was in Australia, Sydney. It just felt awkward after a while. Let me be his friend too. Not sit on the furniture, because only the males were allowed to. Kneel facing the wall, while the 3 males in the house stood behind me, and prayed in a cadence that got louder and louder, until they were screaming about how to wear makeup is to create attraction, to create attraction is to create lust, and to create lust is to sin. I was 18 and wearing makeup. Legit, I thought I was about to be beheaded. I went to dinner at someone's house and their meatloaf had peanuts, and I thought that was weird. You topped mine for sure. I was kicked out of an elementary school friend's birthday party because another friend and I played witches in her treehouse. She was Southern Baptist. There was a literal cauldron in her treehouse. I stand by my decision. I got kicked out of a house once for saying, "What the heck?" They too were Southern Baptists. I am reminded of the story on Reddit, where a girl went to her boyfriend's parents' house to meet them, and they had a ritual where they gather around a table and savagely consume an entire orange, skin and all. She didn't do it, and she upset the entire family. I think it's my favorite story from Reddit. In secondary school, my best friend's family were very devout Christians. For some reason, her mother would not let me use the toilet in their house. Their porcelain thrones were for Christian asses only. Hardly Christ-like if you ask me. When my friend moved away, we would write to each other, and her mother read all the letters. She told me I couldn't sign off my letters by saying things like, "lots of love," or, "love you loads," because it was lesbian. Okay, Susan, take a day off. What a hateful woman. She was unpleasant, for sure. She also wouldn't sit and eat with us, or me, if I had dinner at their place. My friend's dad was super friendly though.